For centuries, the Dead Sea was believed to hide nothing but salt and silence. But when scientists drilled deep beneath its surface, they uncovered something that should never have existed, a structure buried for thousands of years. What began as a routine excavation quickly turned into a terrifying mystery involving sealed chambers and human-like forms preserved in salt. Officials called it a rumor. Insiders say it's real. Whatever lies beneath the Dead Sea was never meant to be found. The Dead Sea excavation that no one expected. It began as a scientific mission, but what the team uncovered beneath the Dead Sea would soon turn into one of the most disturbing discoveries in modern history. In 2010, an international group of geologists and researchers launched a massive drilling project through the International Continental Scientific Drilling Program, known as the ICDP. Their goal was simple. They wanted to study the ancient climate of the Middle East by drilling deep into the seabed and collecting layers of salt and sediment that had built up over hundreds of thousands of years. The Dead Sea, one of the saltiest and most lifeless bodies of water on Earth, was seen as the perfect place to look back into the planet's distant past. The operation began in the southern basin of the Dead Sea, a place so harsh that no plant or fish can survive in it. Temperatures on the surface often reached over 45 degrees Celsius. The water was so thick with salt that it felt more like oil than water. The team's drill eventually pushed 1,200 meters beneath the seabed, breaking all previous records. It was the deepest drilling ever done in a hypersaline environment. What they were not prepared for was what the equipment started picking up far below the salt layers. At first, the readings made no sense. The borehole sensors began detecting strong magnetic interference that distorted their instruments. There were metallic traces where none should exist. Pressure inside the drill shaft rose and fell erratically, as if the machinery was striking something hollow. The deeper they went, the stranger the signals became. What should have been uniform layers of salt and clay suddenly showed signs of geometric repetition. The computer visualizations displayed shapes that no natural process could have formed. Some of the engineers thought it was a software malfunction. Others, including the lead geophysicist from Switzerland, argued that the readings matched the signature of a buried structure, but no one dared to say the word man-made out loud. Not yet. The team rechecked every piece of data, recalibrated their sensors, and drilled a second borehole several hundred meters away. When the same interference appeared again, the researchers knew something was buried deep under the seabed. What began as a peaceful scientific expedition quickly turned tense. The discovery could not be explained by any known geological process. Within weeks, the Israeli Geological Survey, along with German and Swiss experts, expanded the project. They moved more equipment toward the southern basin where the anomalies were strongest. They wanted to know what was down there. Then, without warning, the data logs from the main drilling site were classified. The official reason given was funding and data quality issues, but members of the team later admitted that the decision came only after the instruments detected an enormous cavity sealed within dense salt rock. At that point, the team understood something clearly. The ground beneath the Sea of Death was not just ancient, it was hiding something built, and that realization marked the beginning of a terrifying new phase in the excavation. Strange readings beneath the Sea of Death. After the first drilling results were classified, the research team returned under tight supervision to verify what they had found. They began using more advanced seismic imaging equipment to map the seabed in 3 dimensions. These scanners sent powerful sound waves deep into the ground, then measured how long the echoes took to return. What they saw was unlike anything recorded in the Dead Sea before. At a depth of around 1.1 kilometers, the images revealed a large rectangular shape surrounded by thick salt rock. It had perfectly straight sides and sharp corners. Natural formations in salt or sediment never appear this precise. To the scientists, it looked like the outline of something built, a massive block buried under layers of mineral crust. At first, the team thought the shape might be a software artifact or a glitch in the scanner's algorithm, but when they ran the process again from a different angle, the same structure appeared in the data. When they used sonar pulses instead of seismic sound, the results became even stranger. The buried shape gave off a resonant metallic echo. It was as if the sonar had struck a solid metal surface. There was no known geological explanation for such a sound beneath a natural salt basin. The temperature readings also raised alarms. The instruments showed that the area immediately surrounding the anomaly was several degrees warmer than the surrounding rock. This was impossible. At that depth, everything should have been at a stable and freezing temperature. The heat signature suggested that the material below was either metallic or capable of absorbing and holding energy. Some engineers suspected it might be an ancient meteorite sealed in salt, while others privately wondered if it was an artificial chamber. They began calling the anomaly the block. To the geologists, the name felt safer than admitting what they really thought it was. Officially, the block was described as an unusual example of mineral folding, a natural process where layers of rock bend and compress over time. But not everyone believed that explanation. The dimensions were too perfect. The reflection patterns were too precise. As the tests continued, they drilled 2 more boreholes in nearby areas to confirm their findings. Each borehole returned the same kind of magnetic distortion and the same metallic echo at exactly the same depth. There was no chance this was a coincidence. Within days, the data analysis team reportedly stopped sharing results with the media. Public reporting on the Dead Sea drilling project ended abruptly. Still, inside the team, information continued to spread quietly. Some of the technicians who reviewed the internal scans described seeing symmetrical walls and a smooth reflective surface just beneath the salt layer. They were told not to discuss what they saw, but curiosity and fear had already taken hold among the researchers. The scientists had uncovered something far too structured to be natural, and they needed proof. A remote excavation probe was soon approved to descend into the anomaly. What it recorded would shock everyone involved: the discovery of the man-made Vault 9. When the remote excavation probe finally descended into the anomaly, the research team gathered in silence around the monitors. The drill's sensors cut through dense halite and gypsum for several hours before suddenly dropping into empty space. Beneath the salt was a hollow chamber. The first camera feed came through hazy at first, blurred by drifting salt dust, but once the light adjusted, the image became shockingly clear. The walls were not natural. They were built. The probe's lights revealed rows of interlocking stone blocks arranged in perfect geometric alignment. Each block was polygonal, not rectangular, and appeared to be fused with the surrounding salt, as if heat or pressure had welded them into the seabed. The precision was unlike anything found in regional Bronze Age architecture. Local civilizations of that era had never carved stone with such complexity. Yet the seams between each block were so tight that not even water had seeped through. At several points around the chamber, the drone's camera caught glimmers of metal. Engineers guided the probe closer and confirmed the presence of bronze fastening rings embedded into the structure. They were corroded but still intact. Some were attached to hardened patches of organic material that looked like wood or leather, suggesting that something had once been deliberately sealed there. The deeper the probe went, the more the scene looked less like geology and more like engineering dot. When samples of debris were extracted and analyzed, the results raised more questions. Carbon-14 testing showed that the material dated to roughly 3,200 BCE, give or take 5 centuries. That time frame predated the rise of major Canaanite settlements in the Dead Sea region. According to existing archaeological records, no organized civilization capable of constructing such an underground chamber had existed there at that time. The team realized they were dealing with a structure built by people whose identity was completely unknown. Archaeologists began comparing the vault's design to ancient Mesopotamian containment structures, which were used to isolate dangerous ritual objects or infected materials. In those early civilizations, vaults were not always used for storage. Some were built to trap or separate things considered unholy or dangerous to the living. The parallels were disturbing. Soon, historians joined the discussion, pointing out that the Dead Sea had always been described in biblical and Hebrew writings as a cursed place. One passage in early Jewish texts refers to it as the boundary where God sealed corruption in salt. The phrase was usually seen as metaphorical, but the physical evidence beneath the seabed gave it new meaning. It now appeared that someone in prehistory had literally buried and sealed something under layers of salt and mineral rock, exactly where the old scriptures said corruption had been confined. Who built it, and why it was buried? Once the outer chamber was stabilized, researchers began recovering debris scattered near the entrance. Among the finds were small fragments of pottery and bone coated in thick mineral crust. When cleaned and analyzed, these pieces matched the composition of items found in what archaeologists call pre-Canaanite ritual layers, dating thousands of years before organized city-states existed in the region. These were societies without writing, but the quality of their craftsmanship proved they understood metalwork and high-heat construction. Whoever built the vault had access to tools, knowledge, and purpose far beyond what was expected from their era. Further examination revealed something even more puzzling. The bricks and interior linings of the chamber were made of salt and gypsum, fused together with a form of mineral resin. These materials were not chosen for strength, but for preservation. In ancient mortuary practices, especially in Egypt and Mesopotamia, similar compounds were used to halt decay and keep bodies intact. The builders of the Dead Sea Vault had clearly known how salt could trap and protect organic matter for centuries. This was not a random burial pit. It was a controlled structure made with precise intention, as if designed to isolate or preserve something specific. When carbon and isotope studies came back from European labs, the timeline became even clearer. The construction dated to around the same era as the legendary destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, believed to have taken place near the southern Dead Sea. Those biblical cities were described as centers of corruption and violence, consumed by fire and brimstone that rained from the heavens. Many scholars dismissed those accounts as myth, but now, buried beneath the same region, was a structure from exactly that period, sealed with salt and constructed with materials meant to endure unimaginable heat. This connection fueled theories that survivors from those doomed cities may have tried to contain something left behind: contaminated remains, diseased victims, or what ancient texts called fallen beings. In several early regional myths, the phrase corruption in the flesh described entities or humans afflicted by unnatural mutations. Some modern historians believe those stories might have originated from real biological events, such as outbreaks or radiation exposure following meteor impacts. Others argued it might refer to genetic deformities caused by unknown ancient pathogens. Passages from the Book of Jubilees and certain Mesopotamian tablets both mention this same phrase: corruption in the flesh wiped away by brimstone and salt. These records were always treated as spiritual allegory, but the vault suddenly gave the words physical meaning. It suggested that early civilizations may have used salt as both a weapon and a barrier to contain the remains of something dangerous. Some scientists began to suspect the vault could have served as a prehistoric quarantine facility, an ancient attempt to isolate a deadly outbreak that devastated early settlements. The salt ceiling might have been a form of sterilization, locking away whatever caused the catastrophe. The idea was terrifying yet logical. Salt kills bacteria and preserves bodies, making it the perfect material for long-term containment. However, as the team prepared to break through the final salt barrier to reach the vault's inner core, something changed. The instruments started returning readings that made no sense for a burial or quarantine site. The material inside behaved like it was alive. What they were about to see would destroy every theory of infection or disease and challenge everything archaeology had ever assumed about human history. The biological anomaly. When the final salt barrier was drilled through, the first thing the cameras revealed was movement. Not fast or violent, but a slow pulsing shimmer inside the crystalline walls. The lights from the drone reflected off shapes that were not entirely rock or salt. They were organic. Infrared scanners confirmed it. There were biological silhouettes embedded in the crystal. Their outlines looked vaguely human but distorted, as if bone and tissue had been trapped mid-motion and then fused into the salt. None of the images resembled fossils. They were too intact, too fresh, and their texture didn't match any known mineralized remains. The team extracted several small fragments from the surrounding salt and sent them to 2 independent laboratories for testing. What the results showed stunned the scientists. The salt samples contained living microorganisms. These weren't normal salt-loving bacteria known as halophiles. They were completely new. Genetic sequencing revealed that the microbes were extremophiles, organisms capable of surviving in impossible environments, but they also contained fragments of human DNA. The sequences weren't random contamination. They were perfectly spliced into the genome, arranged in patterns no natural process could create. It was as if something or someone had merged human and microbial DNA thousands of years ago. The microbes had another frightening property. When exposed to light and trace metals in laboratory conditions, They began generating weak electrical currents. Electrodes recorded rhythmic pulses of energy similar to a heartbeat. Scientists described them as biological batteries, living organisms that appeared to feed on salt and metal ions. No one had ever documented anything like this before. They seemed to defy every known rule of evolution and biology. The implications were horrifying. If these microbes had survived for thousands of years sealed beneath the Dead Sea, they could represent a form of ancient life completely different from any known species on Earth. Some researchers speculated that the vault builders may have encountered these organisms in the distant past, perhaps during a catastrophic mutation event, and sealed them away before they spread. Others believed that the microbes themselves might have once been part of human tissue that mutated under extreme environmental or chemical exposure, possibly after a meteor impact or toxic release. Fears of contamination quickly escalated. The Ministry of Science ordered the drilling to stop until biohazard containment procedures could be established. International experts were called in to examine the material, and all extracted samples were transferred to a secure facility. For a short time, the site was officially declared environmentally hazardous, though internal reports admitted that the real fear was something far more unsettling, that the microbes might still be active and capable of spreading beyond the site. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, analysts debated whether these findings could explain ancient texts that described flesh corrupted by fire and salt. It was possible, they said, that early humans had witnessed the same phenomenon and interpreted it as divine punishment. That could explain why the vault was built not as a tomb, but as a biological prison. Despite the danger, the discovery attracted enormous international attention. Investors, governments, and scientific agencies demanded full access to the site, believing that whatever was inside the core chamber could rewrite human history. Against repeated biohazard warnings, the order was finally given to continue drilling. The next breach would go directly into the heart of the vault, and no one was prepared for what waited inside. The vault beneath the salt. When the final drilling phase began, the research team knew they were entering uncharted territory. The remote probe dropped through a narrow borehole into the heart of the anomaly and immediately entered a hollow space unlike anything ever documented beneath the Dead Sea. Laser scans confirmed the chamber's exact size, 12 meters by 12 meters, nearly perfect in its symmetry. The walls were lined with hardened halite, which is crystallized salt that had fused naturally over time, but the structure beneath it was unmistakably built. Each corner was reinforced with massive bronze clamps, still intact despite being entombed for over 5,000 years. It was the precision of the layout that stunned the engineers. Every wall was evenly cut, every surface aligned as if measured with modern tools. As the probe's light swept across the interior, they revealed lines carved into the halite walls. The inscriptions were crude but repetitive, forming geometric symbols and intersecting patterns. Linguists brought in later would identify them as an early form of Semitic proto-writing, the same script that evolved into ancient Hebrew. The translation was incomplete, but one phrase appeared repeatedly: "Do not open." It was not decorative, it was a warning. At the center of the chamber stood the most extraordinary object of all, a massive rectangular block that looked like a sarcophagus, but made from a material no one could identify. Laboratory spectroscopy showed that it contained copper, bitumen, and crystallized salt fused with an unknown metallic compound. None of these elements should have been capable of bonding under natural conditions. It was as if the builders had invented an early alloy thousands of years before metallurgy was even understood. To understand what lay inside the block, the scientists used a technique called low-frequency acoustic mapping, which sends controlled sound waves through solid material to detect internal voids. When they began the scan, the entire block responded in a way that froze everyone watching. It produced a sustained resonance at exactly 19 Hertz, a frequency known in physics to cause discomfort, nausea, and even hallucinations in humans. Every time the signal was repeated, team members reported headaches, dizziness, and a sense of unease that none of them could explain. Further testing showed faint traces of radiation and measurable electrical charges trapped within the surrounding salt layers. These readings matched the behavior of piezoelectric materials, which can store energy for thousands of years under pressure. Somehow, the vault had built up an internal electrical field, possibly a byproduct of the microbes or the mineral fusion process itself. It was clear that opening it could trigger unpredictable effects. Still, the decision was made to proceed. The chamber could not be safely excavated underwater, so engineers planned to remove the central block intact and transport it to a controlled research facility near Ein Gedi, on the western shore of the Dead Sea. The move was carried out under military supervision. Every member of the original team was required to sign new confidentiality agreements, and all electronic communication from the site was disabled. Once the block was placed inside the containment chamber, preparations began for what would be the most carefully monitored opening in modern archaeological history. The team expected to find artifacts, bones, or even contaminated material from an ancient epidemic. But when they finally breached the outer shell, what they found inside would defy every biological and historical law ever recorded. What they found inside defies all belief. When the containment chamber was finally opened, every person in the observation room fell silent. Inside the alloy block lay 3 humanoid forms encased in translucent salt. Their bodies were fused together as if melted into one another before crystallizing. Despite the thousands of years that had passed, the skin was still intact under a thin mineral glaze. Their eyes, mouths, and limbs were perfectly preserved, giving the appearance of people frozen in mid-movement. None of the scientists could explain how flesh could survive that long, especially in the extreme salinity of the Dead Sea. CT scans performed on the bodies exposed something even more disturbing. The internal organs were not fossilized. They were preserved in near-natural condition. The scanners detected faint cellular movement, slow, irregular patterns that indicated some form of metabolic activity. The cells were dividing, but at an impossible rate of once every few months. It was not full life, but it was not death either. When DNA sequencing was carried out, the results shocked every geneticist involved. Each body contained human DNA, but portions of the genome were spliced with unidentified microbial code. The foreign sequences matched the salt-feeding organisms earlier found in the vault walls, proving that the microbes had somehow merged with human tissue. The combination created a biological structure capable of surviving total dehydration. Scientists described the specimens as hybrid organisms, a fusion between man and extremophile bacteria that had adapted to the salt chamber as a permanent habitat. Radiocarbon dating deepened the mystery. One specimen was roughly 4,000 years old, another about 1,000 years, and the third no more than 300. It suggested that the vault had been opened and resealed multiple times across history, each time trapping new subjects inside. No one could explain who had done it or why. The Dead Sea's hypersaline conditions had acted as a natural cryogenic matrix, freezing biological decay and halting decomposition. The hybrids were essentially dormant, preserved in suspended animation. Researchers realized that if the microbial DNA could awaken under the right conditions, these bodies might not be completely lifeless. The implications were horrifying. Religious historians quickly drew parallels to ancient texts describing the Watchers, beings mentioned in the Book of Enoch and referenced in early Hebrew writings. According to those accounts, the Watchers were angels who descended to earth and defied divine order by breeding with humans, producing offspring known as the Nephilim, giants and hybrids that were said to corrupt mankind. These beings were later cursed and buried beneath layers of earth and salt after the Great Flood, their existence erased from human history. The sight of the preserved bodies, half human and half something else, seemed to echo those same forbidden stories. The spliced DNA between human cells and unknown microorganisms mirrored the ancient idea of a fusion between celestial and earthly life. To many theologians, the vault's location near the Dead Sea, which is the biblical site associated with divine punishment, was no coincidence. It was the same region long described as a boundary between the living world and the realm of judgment. Official scientists refused to make any religious interpretations, maintaining that the discovery required more study. Yet privately, many admitted the truth was deeply unsettling. The hybrid DNA and unnatural preservation didn't fit into any recognized category of human evolution or biology. Whatever these entities were, they should not have existed, and if the vault truly held them in containment, It meant someone thousands of years ago had known they were dangerous enough to seal away forever. Within days, official bodies intervened, citing biological instability. The site was shut down and the vault was resealed under military guard. Every researcher was forced to sign new confidentiality agreements. Still, footage began leaking online. Officials have since labeled the entire story a rumor, dismissing the images as fabrications. They claim no physical evidence of the vault or its contents exists, but several insiders insist the discovery was real and deliberately hidden to prevent global panic. Some believe the story was released and then officially denied to keep the public confused. No one knows for sure whether the vault truly exists beneath the Dead Sea, or if its contents are still waiting there, sealed in the salt just below the surface. What do you think about the bodies discovered in the vault? Comment down below.